What's up, guys? 0-1-1 yesterday. Really not great. That under was very frustrating in the Arizona-Cincinnati game, although Hunter Green was getting away with a lot of walks, which you do expect him to be a little bit wild. Maybe not that wild, but he was still holding Arizona's offense in check. The starting pitchers both did their part. I think it was Ciccone for Arizona, right? Like, he did pretty well. It was a 2-run game, I think, into the 6th inning. And then it was like all hell broke loose, basically. I think, was it 1-1 or 2-0 at that, but I forget what it was. But then it was like 7 runs were scored over the next 2.5 innings, basically. You get into the 8th inning, and all of a sudden it's at 9 runs. And it was at 2 runs, like an inning and a half before that or whatever, 2 innings before that. Extremely frustrating. But then the bullpens were able to hold of the offense scoreless in the final inning and a half or so or whatever to push that thing at 9. Because I had it at under 9. I believe it was the right play. The under first 5 inning would have been a winner. So that's also frustrating when the first 5 inning wager is a win, but the full game wager is not. And then, the other game, what can you say, man? I mean, Tobias Myers only went 4 innings. I told you he wasn't going to go deep in the game from Milwaukee, and he walked 4 guys. His strikeout walk ratio was a lot worse than Gray's, who I think Gray's was 6-1 in the game, and it didn't even matter. It was like every base runner that Gray allowed on base came around to score, all of them. All right, well, I think actually he put 8 men on base, 6 of them scored, whatever. And Myers, I think, like I said, he walked 4 guys, but he kind of just got away with it. Even though he didn't even go that deep into the game, Milwaukee does have a little bit of a bullpen edge. Kind of unfortunate, and that one, the final score of that game, probably not totally indicative of what actually happened in that game. I think Gray actually, like I said, he outpitched Myers in some of the metrics, especially the strikeout walk numbers. But that was just a loser, and that line had shot up pretty high. I think St. Louis went off at like a -140 something favorite or something. I saw multiple professionals playing St. Louis on like first 5 inning bets and stuff like that, wanting to get in on that starting pitching matchup, and it just didn't happen. We'll move on to today. We got the 2 hockey games today. I'm not getting involved in hockey. I will be in attendance at the Panthers-Bruins game, and I am not confident in the Bruins. Florida's up from -113 to -120 as a road favorite in this one, which is about in line with them being about -170 or whatever at home, which is what they were. 64% of the tickets, 67% of the cash on Florida. Florida is the public team. Looks like they have a little bit of the cash on them, and the line has moved in that direction up on Florida. This is a hard one to read, man, because on the one hand, you could say the Bruins, the final score looked so bad in game 2 after the Bruins had a nice final score in game 1. It was the complete opposite in game 2. You could probably argue that both of those games were not as lopsided as the final scores look. So does that mean this is going to be a zag back to the, or I guess a zig back to the zag here with if you had Boston, my Bruins winning game 1 in the zig, then Florida zagged in game 2. Does that mean it's going to zig back the other way with the Bruins making the adjustments in this one? That is possible, and you'd be taking an anti-public home underdog and taking the Bruins here, but I'm not totally confident in this. I think there's an argument to be had for Swayman's confidence being broken with that game, because he had played well in every game that he'd started. He started 6 of the 7 games against Toronto. Coach Montgomery had basically made him the guy, basically, which I think was the right decision. And Swayman looked like one of those goalies to beat, man. Although now it looks like Shesterkin, the way he's playing in that Rangers series, that could be pretty much all over there, which is unfortunate for my bracket. I really did not expect that. Odds makers have Carolina being the better team, of course, as I keep saying. But Swayman finally had a game where he really did not do well after he'd done well in all the other playoff games. It was like even the games the Bruins lost were games where their offense just really did not play well. But now after that brutal game, and they actually took him out of the game, put Olmark in when the game was already a blowout, and he didn't really do well either. Which goal are they even going to go with here? So I think that they have to go with Swayman. Because if you take him out and you bench him after a bad performance, I think that's going to really just negatively impact his confidence even more. Whereas he has one bad game, you put him back in, at least that might mean that he'll maintain his confidence, although there's a chance it still might be like broken. But Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, that's kind of that's the way it goes there, man. I don't even know who's going to be started. It looks like Swayman is potentially probably going to be the starter again in this one, according to starting goalies, although, of course, it's not confirmed. You won't see it confirmed until tonight. So I think that is the move, though, to put Swayman back in there. And I think if they take Swayman out, I actually probably like the Bruins even less. I don't love them in the game to begin with, but I think it's probably worse if they don't just go back to Swayman and let him rebuild his confidence. That's what you want to do, man. Like with a quarterback, if they throw interceptions or something, let him go back out there, throw some more passes. Don't just bench him and shake his confidence even more. Though they did pull Swayman in the blow-up, but put him back in there. I think that is the move there. I think the Bruins will have at least a better chance if that is what they do. And I think the team might come out with some aggression being back at home. And the end of that game just had a lot of fighting going on. So we'll see if the Bruins can kind of bring that home with them and try to adjust after that bad game. Edmonton, Vancouver is the late game. This is game 2 of that series. You see Edmonton down from -130 to -123, so the money line moving against them a bit in this one. But it does look like they have the cash on them, although they are public again. 79% of the tickets, 96% of the cash. So it looks like they do have the cash discrepancy on them. But I don't know if that's accurate because it looks like the line has moved down on them a little bit. And they certainly are public. So Edmonton is a public road team in this one. And I believe they won game 1. No, they lost game 1. Really? Wow. I wasn't even paying attention to that. So Vancouver actually outplayed them. Edmonton, very un-Edmonton-like game there. Vancouver dominated in the faceoffs. I only saw the early score, and I looked at the score and I was like, oh, that game's over. Edmonton was winning 4-1, and they completely blew it. And Vancouver, even though they were still down 4-2 going into the third, Vancouver wound up winning the game in regulation 5-4. That's crazy. Vancouver dominated the faceoff percentage. They had more shots. Edmonton had very few shots in the game, which is actually very un-Edmonton-like. Edmonton basically being all offense. So that being the case, I don't know, man. Is Edmonton going to be hung over because they basically had that game in hand and then just completely imploded? Or are they going to zigzag this thing? Are they going to zag and play better and adjust to playing really badly in the third period of that game? I think it's actually tough to say. Oddsmaker's telling you Edmonton's the better team, and I still agree with that. And maybe you're getting a bit of a cheaper price on Edmonton this time because of the way they blew it in game 1. But the score is kind of indicative of the way that game went, too. I think the fact that Edmonton was up 4-1 was actually kind of misleading based on the stats in that one. Edmonton really got outshot and out-face-offed in that game. But then you could also argue that that's not going to happen again. You're not going to see Edmonton only have 18 shots on goal in an entire game again. You're probably not going to see Vancouver have 64% of face-offs again either. So those numbers could gravitate back towards the mean as well. So that's a tough game to gauge, man. And is Vancouver going to be kind of out of gas after having to make a huge comeback against this Edmonton team? I don't know. So I could see arguments in both directions, like the market read. You could kind of read in both directions now, and that's tough to gauge, man. Moving over to the NBA, I'm going to have a play in the Western Conference game, but in the Eastern Conference game, I mean, again, this is going to be a hard read, man. The Pacers, Knicks at Pacers. Knicks are up 2-0, winning both games at home, having to make comebacks in both, actually. The Knicks were losing game 1. It was a pretty close game, but they were down several points pretty late in game 1 and wound up being able to finish off the comeback and win in game 1. Pacers had a double-digit lead, I think, at halftime in game 2, and I think Jalen Brunson actually got hurt in that game, so he was out. Then he came back in the second half, and the Knicks completely flipped the script and had a great second half and wound up winning and covering for me. So Jalen Brunson's injury almost kind of cost me a little bit of that bet too. But when he came back in, it was kind of lights out. Knicks just played great in the second half there. Brunson, I think, is questionable, a game-time decision coming into this game, although I kind of expect him to play. But you do see the Pacers flipping over to Indiana at home now. Indiana's up from a 5-point favorite to 7 with juice. They have 65% of the tickets on, so they're public, which is weird because is the public coming in on the Pacers? I guess I could see that because the public likes the fact that Indiana scores a lot, and they're probably reacting to the injury situation for the Knicks. But you would kind of expect the public to actually still be on the Knicks, though, just because they're up 2-0, and now this line just looks crazy high, right? And the Pacers have 77% of the cash, though, so the cash discrepancy is on Indiana in this one. So they do have the cash discrepancy. This one, I would probably only take the points with the Knicks because I think this is an overreaction. You got to figure out, why is this line as high as it is? So the Knicks were 5.5, I think, at home in game one. They dropped to 4.5 in game two, I think, based entirely off of the game one results. So I came in on the Knicks in that one, thinking that was a little bit of an overreaction. But the Knicks are playing with a really thin roster, and it's only gotten worse for the Knicks, man. They have so many injuries now. It's just crazy. It's like guys are just dropping in every game now. Brunson got injured, like I said, in game two. And he's, of course, like by far their best player. Great player. He is a game-time decision, like I said. He should be back. Mitchell Robinson got hurt, I think, in one of the earlier games, right? And he is out. So he's going to be out for the rest of the series, out for the season. Of course, the Knicks are already down Randall, who I don't even think is really a positive, really, even though he's a good player. I don't think he's great for team chemistry, and they've been out without Bogdanovich for a while. So they've been playing without those guys for a long time, so that doesn't matter. Mitchell Robinson, I think, went down in game one of this series, so I think maybe that affected the line a little bit. I forgot to mention that. Maybe that is part of the reason why the Knicks were a little bit less of a favorite in game two in this series as well. Mitchell Robinson was out. Now they lost OG Anunoby, who's one of the best players from the Knicks, who they acquired, I believe, in a trade. I believe both of these teams picked up these guys in these trades with, was it with Toronto? Did they get Anunoby from Toronto? Because I know, obviously, Indiana got Siakam from Toronto. Man, so Anunoby is out. It looks like he is going to be out for this game, and he may be back in the next game. So it looks like he's definitively out, which is part of the reason why the Pacers are up to 7. But you got to think about this, man. If the Knicks were, like, let's say without Robinson, the Knicks are a 4.5-point favorite at home. It flips to the other side. You're expecting Indiana to be about a 3.5-point favorite or so at home, I think, if that line kind of holds true. And we're seeing 7 here. Is that just because Anunoby is out? Like, do we react that strongly just to Anunoby being out? Like, is he worth that many points? Is this also a reaction to Jalen Brunson being out? Like, does this line indicate that they don't think Brunson's going to play either? But if both those guys are out, it's like the Knicks don't even have a team at this point. Man, this Knicks roster is running thin, man. And this might be a situation where the Knicks just say, like, we're going to just kind of like, I would lean to the Knicks just because I think the line's an overreaction. But what if the Knicks are comfortable with a 2-0 lead right now and just kind of don't show up for this game, and they kind of use this as a, like, let's get healthy type of game? We'll show up again in the next game, up 2-1 still. Maybe. That might be the case here. So this game's really difficult to read, man, for all those reasons. I am not going to get involved. The total's gone down from 225 to 222.5. 55% of the tickets with 62% of the cash on the under. I don't know if I'd be comfortable playing the under either. I mean, the line dropping is probably also reacting to these guys being out. It's like, where's the Knicks scoring gonna come from, man? I mean, Brunson, I think, is going to have to play in this game. I kind of think that he will be out there, but then without the OG, I love that name, it OG. Is that really the guy's first name? OG Anunoby. Without him, I think that's going to affect the Knicks offensively, but it probably will also affect them defensively. So does that mean the Pacers are going to be able to score more in this one? And game 2 is actually at a shockingly high pace, too. Like, the Knicks are a team that is one of the slowest paced teams in the NBA, although pacing collisions don't matter as much in the NBA as they do in college. But it was shocking to see the game at that fast a pace. The Knicks, like, seemingly not even trying to slow it down, just being like, okay, we'll play up to your pace. And then the Knicks still winning and covering and making a comeback in that one. I mean, it is true the Pacers really struggle defensively. So there's a lot going on in this game. It's hard to read. The game that I'm going to jump in on, though, is Nuggets T-Wolves. I mean, I'm going to take the points with the Nuggets here. People seem to be writing them off. Now, they lost 2 games at home. If there's going to be, I mean, these are the returning champs, man. And now this is going to be like this kind of road reversal type of thing. It's possible the T-Wolves are kind of feeling like a bit like pretty comfortable now. They just took both games in Denver, man. And in the second game, it wasn't even close, man. It was just kind of a blowout win. The T-Wolves might be feeling a little bit overconfident at this point. If they come in and if they're going to be feeling overconfident, it's got to be in a game like this where they just won both games on the road. And now they're coming back home. If we beat the Nuggets twice and beat them so easily in game 2, and now coming back home, like we're going to beat them easily at home, right? That's got to be their feeling. Whereas the Nuggets, they're going to be a desperate team, man. And they're the returning champs. They're the team that has the experience. Their backs are against the wall, and you're giving me 4.5 points to the Nuggets. And it seems like the public might even be kind of writing them off now. You got T-Wolves up from 3 to 4.5 in this one. 53% of the tickets on the Nuggets, but 69% of the cash. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is coming in on the Nuggets, looking like we think this is going to be a zig-zag type of spot where a lot of times when you have these 0-2 teams, they are a good play, man. Game 3, because if you fall down 3-0, it's basically over. No team has ever come back from that. So if you're going to be playing now down 0-2 and you're getting points. I mean, a lot of times it works better if the team's coming home after losing the first 2, but this might even be stronger, man. If you lost both games at home and now you're coming out on the road and you're getting points here, I'm going to have to just take it with the Nuggets, man. You could see this T-Wolves team just being maybe too overconfident. I mean, after a 26-point win, something's got to give. Like I said, these are still the returning champs here, man. And you do have guys who are listed. I mean, the injury report's all lit up for Denver right now with Caldwell Pope listed as game time decision, Jackson and Murray. I mean, Murray is the biggest the most key component out of those 3 players there. Murray, they're all listed as game time decisions. So we'll see what happens with the Nuggets there. Like, are those, are those question marks kind of factoring in? I don't know. But I guess, there's also the question marks around Murray. I guess he got fined for throwing a towel in the direction of a ref in game 2. I mean, Nuggets were just getting frustrated in game 2, but I think he was in the post-game interviews and he was basically like saying like, we got to do better than this. So it seems like the T-Wolves, the Nuggets, they know, like they absolutely know what's at stake here. And that was an embarrassing performance, man. You lose game 1 and then you have an even worse game in game 2 in a game that historically would be a nice like zigzag spot for you. This has got to be where the zigzag comes in, man. I mean, this is it for the Nuggets here. The defending champs, if they have any fight in them at all, and you're getting a ton of points with them, if they have any fight at all, they're going to show up in this one, man. So I'm going to just take the points with the Nuggets in this one. You're giving me points with a team in total desperation mode. Let's just do it. Let's go. We'll move on to Major League Baseball. I mean, I had my eye on a couple of these games. Action Network, which is the site that I use to kind of look at the whole, look at where you can find the best odds at all the sports books I have available and whatever, seems to be down right now. So I might not be able to tell you the exact odds on a couple of these games, but I think we will be able to talk about the games that I'm going to be on. I'm actually going to be on 3 games, I think, right now. And I will mention a couple of leans that I have as well, but I'm not going to quite get there with a couple of these leans. Of course, you have Jared Jones pitching for Pittsburgh, and I think for once I'm actually not going to get involved in this one. Jones against Assad. That is a pitching matchup between 2 young pitchers, man. And I think Jones has never been seen before by the Cubs. Pittsburgh is a small favorite in that one. I don't see the percentages. Pittsburgh, I believe, did they play yesterday, though? I don't know. They might have played yesterday, though, and the Cubs didn't. I forget if that's the case. I could look real quick, I guess. No, neither team played yesterday, so both teams are going to have rested pens as well. So I think it sets up the best play, I think, in that one is to take the under. It looks like it's ticked up a little bit to 7.5. I like the under there with Jones just being very, very good in his Major League debut, man. I mean, like I said, he's headed towards Rookie of the Year type of stuff. The Cubs offense, even though they're good, they might struggle early on against Jones, who has really good stuff, and they've never seen it before. Assad, I think, only has a small sample size worth of numbers against Pittsburgh's hitters, and I think he's done pretty well against them. He's having a pretty good season as well. Javier Assad, not the leader of Syria, Assad, but Javier Assad, the pitcher for the Cubs. I think the best way to look in that one would be to the under, although I do actually slightly lean to Jared Jones as well, just because he's, I think, the somewhat better starting pitcher, as well, and has never been seen before by the Cubs hitters. Pittsburgh has ticked up a little from -125 to -127 in that one. You also have, I think Philadelphia is just a total mismatch with Suarez against Rogers against Miami. Miami is returning home from the West Coast, but you're not really getting any bargain playing Philadelphia there, with Philadelphia being a huge favorite. But it is the type of spot where you have the crap team with the worst pitcher in Miami with Rodgers returning home from a road trip and being an underdog. That tends to not be a good spot for that team. You're just laying, I think, way too much of a price with Philadelphia to really play that one, unfortunately. And then I actually kind of lean against the Yankees. They're only a small road favorite, having played yesterday, and they did lose to Houston. They still won the series against Houston, but still, it is the Houston Astros, even though Houston hasn't been playing well. That was still kind of a big game. Yankees used a few of their relievers in that one. Yankees, very public road favorite in this one. 94% of the tickets, but 96% of the cash. So it looks like they might actually have the cash discrepancy. I don't know if I buy that. Schmidt is pitching for the Yankees. They're actually down from minus 135 to minus 130. And if you look into it, his numbers against Tampa are really, really bad. And I don't think he's a very good pitcher. I think his ERA this year is actually kind of misleading. His whip is a little bit higher than what that ERA would make it look like. His whip tells you his ERA should be higher than that 1.31. I mean, he isn't very good. And against Tampa, even though their offense isn't good, they're 323 off of them lifetime in 65 at bats. So they've had pretty good success off with an 877 OPS. So he's been pretty bad against them, but I don't really want to come in on Taj Bradley either. Bradley's a very young guy. He's 23. He made his debut last season, and he really struggled. A 1.39 whip. He had good strikeout numbers, and he was allowing too many hits and walking too many guys. Definitely wild. So I think got to be a wait and see type of thing with him, even though this is going to be his season debut this time versus the Yankees. Yankees have one guy who's faced him before, Verdugo, and Verdugo is 5 for 5 off of them with 3 doubles and a triple and a walk. So a 1,000 batting average and 3,000 OPS. I mean, there's not really much to take away from that. It's one hitter, but still. I mean, what we've seen out of Bradley so far, not the greatest signs. So I can't really come in and play Tampa in that one. Although I would lean against the Yankees. And similarly, I actually kind of lean against Houston too, because they're coming off a big win over the Yankees yesterday, and they have Framber Valdez pitching. I don't necessarily trust them. They're a public road favorite here, although they've gone up from minus 120 to minus 133 against a not very good Detroit team. 80% of the tickets, but 85% of the cash. So it does look like some of the money's coming in on Houston. Valdez, I mean, he puts too many men on base, man. I just don't like what I see out of him. His whip is way too high at 1.41. He does have decent numbers against Detroit, though. And I think, I mean, he has the better strikeout stuff over Casey Mize, and I don't like what we've seen out of Mize recently either, and his whip is a bit too high too at 1.33. His numbers against Houston are not bad, although he's walked too many guys against them, but he's pretty much held them in check against some of their better hitters, although only 5 of them have faced him first. So that's a tough read too, but Houston played yesterday and Detroit did not. Detroit returning home from a road trip, but only a short road trip. 2 series road trip that only took them as far as New York and then back into, I think, Cleveland, so back into the Central Time Zone. So slight lean to Houston there. Games that I'm actually going to be on, though, we'll play first one up. I'm going to play the Chicago White Sox, man. They actually won yesterday against Cleveland, and Cleveland is just way too public here, man. People still don't like the White Sox, don't have faith in the White Sox. The White Sox have at least been winning some games recently. They've won actually 4 of their last 6 games, so they've kind of turned it on a little bit. Beating the Cardinals twice, beating the Rays at least 1 game out of the 3. Rays were in revenge in that because the White Sox had swept them before. And then the White Sox played pretty well yesterday and beat Cleveland. So does that mean Cleveland's going to bounce back? I don't know, man, because I think what we're seeing here with the records, Cleveland's going to be too public because the record is really good. But I think they started off the season hot, and now they've kind of regressed backward a bit. I don't think Cleveland is as good as what they looked like in the early part of the season. Chicago is bad, but they're probably not as bad as their start to the season either, even though they are pretty bad. Both teams used some relievers yesterday. Chicago did use some of the back end of their bullpen to get the save yesterday, so that worries me a little bit. The fact they used 3 relievers, but it was still a close game. Cleveland still used 2 of their kind of better relievers as well in a close game, so bullpen situation, I don't think is a huge edge one way or the other, but I think the starting pitching matchup. So, I mean, I could see playing this as a first 5-inning wager. am leaning towards going full game. I mean, you're getting the White Sox. They're down from -110 to -105. So the line's actually moved against them a little bit. Cleveland, very public, though, with I think the public coming in thinking, oh, Cleveland's going to bounce back here. They have the way, way better record than the White Sox. They have to be the better team, right? I mean, yeah, they're the better team. The odds makers are telling you it's not that significant in this particular matchup, though. And probably the records are a bit misleading just overall. 92% of the tickets on Cleveland, 97% of the cash. So we're looking at, getting Cleveland. Yeah, I mean, they do have more of the cash on them for now, at least, but they're very, very public and kind of a public, like still slight like road dog, I guess, sort of still in underdog kind of territory, although it looks like it's shifting a little bit to them maybe being the small favorite here. This starting pitching matchup is one of the biggest age discrepancies you're ever going to see, man. You got 37-year-old Carlos Carrasco pitching for Cleveland. He's just been awful this season so far, man. I mean, he's reaching the end of his career. 1.62 whip and 5.67 ERA. What is there to like about this? He's coming off a decent start against Anaheim, but it is Anaheim. I mean, they don't play that well. He only had 3 strikeouts in the game, 2 walks. That's not great. He allowed 1 run, but, I mean, he's allowed a lot of runs in most of his other starts. He had a couple of starts where the starts otherwise where he allowed 1 run. He didn't even make it 5 innings in either of them against the Yankees and Minnesota. So there's not much to like out of him, man. He has 26 strikeouts and 17 walks and 37 hits allowed and 33 and a third this year so far. So an unbelievably high amount of walks. He's given up 5 homers too, so that's not good either. He's been giving up the long ball. Number of hits allowed is way too much, just everything. Strikeout rate pretty low. Those numbers were all terrible. And against the White Sox hitters, even though they're not that good, they're 15 for 48 off him lifetime with 4 doubles, a triple, 3 home runs. He does have a 13-2 strikeout walk ratio against him, but it's still a 3.12 batting average against him and 965 OPS. So these White Sox hitters have basically shelled Carrasco in his career. And he's up against Crochet, who I was touting earlier in the season. He's only 24, much younger guy. He's a guy who was coming out of the bullpen for almost his entire career. He's been in the league for a few seasons, really. He came into the league at a very early age, and he's finally been converted into a full-time starter. I think this year has been the only time he's been a starter. And he's got a 1.01 whip, man. So the fact that he has a 5.31 ERA, it's a little bit misleading based on his other stats. I mean, his whip is indicative of that his ERA should be a lot lower than that. He's coming off a nice couple of starts in a row, kind of getting his momentum back after he had 3 bad starts in a row. He bounced back, had a pretty good start against Minnesota and a good start against St. Louis. Crossed those 2 starts, 13-1 strikeout walk ratio, and only allowing 5 hits in 11 innings. So he's getting back on track. Over the season, he has a 53-9 strikeout walk ratio and 32 hits allowed in 40 2/3. So that is all really good. Great strikeout numbers, great strikeout walk numbers there. Problem is the long ball. He's allowed 8 home runs, so he's got to keep that down. He's allowed 2 in his last 2 starts, 1 in each of them. So maybe that's going down a little bit. He allowed 3 in 1 start against Philly, and other than that, he hasn't allowed more than 1 in any start. So I don't think it's that bad, really. And he's faced a few pretty hard-hitting offenses in there, but he has faced a couple of not very good ones either. Overall, his stats are just much better, man. I think Crochet, you're getting a big pitching edge here, in my opinion, in Crochet. And Cleveland has not seen him this year. They've seen him, I think, probably in his relief appearance. Well, it must be in his relief appearances because he hadn't started a game until this year. So across those relief appearances, Cleveland is only 1 for 10 off him lifetime. But he does have 2 walks against them, no strikeouts. That's a little weird, but it's a small sample size. They're only 100 off him. Of course, 1 for 10, but 350 OPS because a couple of walks mixed in there. But Cleveland's hitters in that small sample size haven't done well against them. Naylor has the only hit off of him on Cleveland's entire lineup. So some of the hitters are going to be a little bit unfamiliar with Crochet as well. So I'm going to take Crochet in this one, man. Maybe you want to turn this into a first 5 inning because it's really almost entirely dependent on the starting pitching. And you could argue that the White Sox bullpen is at a slight disadvantage here. So maybe take this one first 5. With Garrett Crochet. We'll have to see what the money line is on that one, and I can't tell you right now because Action Network is completely down. So we'll have to see, but their website is completely fucked right now. So we'll see about that one. The next one I'm going to come in on is going to be on we finally see numbers on this. St. Louis against Milwaukee. Milwaukee is sitting at minus 130, and I think you can jump in on Milwaukee on this one, man. This one, I probably would lean to kind of just taking this one full game. I mean, Milwaukee did win yesterday. Didn't really have to do that much with their bullpen. Both teams used 3 relievers. Milwaukee kind of saved a lot of their pen with Myers leaving the game early. They used Koenig for 2 innings and Vieira for 2 innings, actually. So they kind of saved their better relievers. St. Louis used 3 of their relievers. So the bullpen at best is kind of a wash, but I think Milwaukee has the better bullpen overall. And I like Milwaukee in the starting pitching matchup better than I like St. Louis here, even though Milwaukee did win yesterday in what I thought was a bad spot for Milwaukee. But now Milwaukee's through that one. They won after maybe not even really getting the best of the pitching performance. Like I said, I was against Milwaukee yesterday. This is a spot where I think you want to come in on Milwaukee. Starting pitching matchup. Lance Lynn is pitching for St. Louis, and the public is probably going to come in on Milwaukee just because they have the better record. And they're in first place versus the last place St. Louis team. But Lance Lynn is the known quantity, so I don't know if the public is going to want to come in on him a little bit here, not having any clue who Milwaukee's starting pitcher even actually is. Lance Lynn, they know who he is. He's got a 3.28 ERA this year, which looks good, but a 1.4 whip doesn't look good, and that's what he has this year. 33 strikeouts and 16 walks in 35 2/3, 5 homers allowed, so he's been walking too many guys. The home run number is not that great. So his whip, he's been putting 200 men on base, man. And 34 hits isn't that bad, but very high walk numbers, not great. And then versus the Brewers, I mean, they've seen him a bunch. They're 16 for 60 off of him, 5 doubles, 3 homers. He has a 14-4 strikeout walk ratio. This is over their entire careers, but it's a 267 batting average, which is mediocre, but Milwaukee's seen him, and they've done fine against him, I would say. And an 812 OPS is pretty high, so they've had those extra base hits off him. Factoring in there. Again, this is a big age discrepancy too, so I'm coming in on this one, man. Lance Lynn. I'm going against Lance Lynn. We got Robert Gasser, and he does not actually throw gas. He's a lefty, more kind of control pitcher, making his major league debut for Milwaukee, but he's a guy that has 4 pitches in his arsenal, basically. He's got fastball. I think he actually has cutter and sinker, really. I had a slider and then occasional changeup, so maybe even could argue his 5 pitches. His slider is like a pretty good change of speed pitch with a lot of movement on it. He's got really good strikeout numbers in the minors, although he's been dealing with bone spurs, I think, which is what he's kind of coming off of. But his ERA doesn't look good in the minors this season, but his strikeout numbers look good, and he's been pretty good in the minors prior to that, and he's never been seen before. So I think he's got good strikeout numbers in the minors, and the fact that he hasn't been seen before, that's something that I like. So that's what you're getting with Gasser here. He's going to come in and be mixing in those changes of speed. He does throw in like the low to mid 90s on that fastball, and he's got a couple of those moving fastballs. And that sinker, I guess, is a pitcher that really has a lot of movement and fools hitters. So I like Gasser in this one, man, because St. Louis just has never faced him before, and he's a pretty highly touted prospect, making his major league debut against a pretty suspect Lance Lynn, and facing a lineup that's also worse. So you're getting the offensive edge, and I think Milwaukee has the better bullpen as well. So, and the rest edge in the bullpen, I don't think goes really one way or the other here either. So I think you can go full game on this one. We'll factor a Gasser versus Lynn into the mix there, and we'll take Milwaukee. And then finally, I will say, I don't know if I'm going to get in on this one, but I like Kansas City, although they wanted a blowout yesterday against the Angels. Looking at this one, both teams kind of really didn't use much of their pen yesterday, so the pen is kind of a wash, but I think you're getting an advantage with Alec Marsh, too, and he's only 25. He's got a 1.01 whip this year and 270, 2.7 ERA, but he hasn't gone that deep into most of his starts, so that worries me a little bit this season. He got a 17-7 strikeout walk ratio. That's not great in 26 2/3, but only 20 hits allowed, so his strikeout numbers aren't that great. But I do lean to Marsh in this one. He's up against Griffin Canning, who's definitely the worst of the 2 pitchers. Still a young guy, but 1.43 whip, 6.69 ERA. I mean, there's nothing to like about that. And Kansas City has hit him 8 for 24 with 3 home runs, 7-2 strikeout walk ratio, but it's still a 333 batting average against him and 1,093 OPS. Canning, the way worse pitcher there. So I do lean to Alec Marsh there. And looking at his stats versus Anaheim, what does he have? Oh, Anaheim's never faced Marsh, and Marsh is coming off the DL. So those are actually a couple of those are things that I like. Like when a guy's coming off the DL, I think he kind of gets undervalued a little bit. You're getting Kansas City, very public road favorite, though, so I'm probably not going to want to do it, but they're down from minus 120 to minus 119, 93% of the tickets, 96% or 97% of the cash on. So Kansas City, obviously public, but we'll see what actually happens with Kansas City there. But I lean to the Kansas City side there. I think that is a bit of a pitching mismatch there with Marsh, but a few of his stats I don't love, though, but his whip is pretty good this season. He's kept those hits down. I will mention Seattle has Brian Wu making his first start of the season as well, and he has pitched well against Oakland in the past. He made his Major League debut last year, so I like Wu, but Seattle's returning home from a road trip, too, so I don't love that. I do think Paul Blackburn for Oakland is pitching better than what he actually is this season so far, so I think you're maybe not getting an edge with Blackburn there. So I would kind of lean to Seattle, but the fact that they're returning home from a road trip, I don't want anything to do with that. And then finally, the other game I'm going to be on, I also lean to Texas, by the way, because I think they didn't play yesterday, but they're a heavy public road favorite, so I don't want anything to do with that either. John Gray, the better pitcher over Austin Gomber, but you're paying a price for Texas, and Texas didn't play yesterday, I don't think, whereas Colorado did. So I don't love that, but the other game I'm actually going to jump in on is going to be to fade the San Francisco Giants, and they're public now, man. They're returning home from a road trip. They played pretty poorly yesterday. They played yesterday, and they're coming out of elevation. Both of these teams played yesterday, San Francisco and Cincinnati, but San Francisco's returning home from a road trip. Played poorly yesterday. They're coming out of elevation now. I think it's a bad spot for San Francisco, man. I don't like San Francisco in this one. They played badly against the Rockies. They got rocked 9-1. They used 3 of their relievers, so their bullpen situation not really the best either. Not a great spot for them, man. Returning home with no time off out of elevation. Pretty bad spot for them, whereas you got we're going to be taking who are they playing against here? We're going to be taking Cincinnati Reds, who I don't like the fact that the Cincinnati Reds, their offense was off to a hot start this season, and since then they've kind of completely fallen off, and their offensive metrics aren't as good as their offense has looked. And they did also play yesterday, but they lost in that final home game. And now they're getting to go out on the road and kind of forget about that. So I actually like that. They used Nick Martinez for 2 innings yesterday in relief of Green, so kind of save the rest of their bullpen. So I think their bullpen situation is not really in a bad spot. They're getting to go out on the road and start a road trip here, which I do actually like. I like that spot better, even though they're having to go out to the West Coast. I mean, San Francisco also is, although San Francisco is only moving 1 time zone over, still, I don't think it's a good spot for them. Returning home from that long road trip, I think coming out of elevation. Their road trip took them to the East Coast, to Boston, and then Philadelphia, and then into elevation to Colorado, and now finally returning home. Not a great spot for San Francisco, man. And then we're getting out of the starting pitching. I don't like either with Logan Webb. He has a 3.5 ERA, and people know who he is, so I think public's going to like San Francisco a bit here, but his whip is 1.36. That's indicative that his stats should be worse than they are. His ERA should be worse. He's got a 36-12 strikeout walk ratio, which isn't horrible, but it's not great, and he's allowed 51 hits. So, again, that whip, not good. He's allowed too many base runners in 46 1/3. Not a great strikeout number there either, so he's not coming in and overpowering guys either. Just not great overall, though. His stats against Cincinnati's hitters are pretty good, though. They're 9 for 47 off him lifetime, 14-3 strikeout walk ratio, 2 doubles, a home run. So they're only 191 off him lifetime. So that scares me a little bit. But I'm not only going with the starting pitching here. I'm going full game here. It's a 538 OPS. So his stats are good against these Reds hitters. That is for sure. But Andrew Abbott is pitching for Cincinnati. He's got the better stats this year, even though he's 1-4. His ERA looks similar, 3.32, but his whip is way better, 1.16. He's got a 35-11 strikeout walk ratio and 33 hits allowed in 38 innings. So his stats are definitely better on the season. 7 home runs allowed. He's got to keep that down. The long ball has been a problem, but I think a lot of those problems have come in some of these more hitter-friendly parks, except for the fact that he allowed 2 in Seattle. But, Cincinnati is not an easy pitching park, man, and he's allowed some of those home runs at home, of course. and some to some good hitting teams as well, a couple of them in Texas. So I don't know if there's that much to read into the fact that he's allowed that many home runs so far. And his stats against the Giants are good, and they've seen less of him. They're 3 for 15 off in lifetime with only 1 extra base hit, a double, 4.2 strikeout walk ratio, so very similar to Webb's stats really against Cincinnati. He's got a 200 batting average against them and 561 OPS. So Abbott's stats are better on the season, I would say, and he hasn't been seen as much. So I think you could argue that Cincinnati does have an edge here because both pitchers have pretty good numbers, similar numbers against the opposing lineup. So I think you give the edge to Abbott there because his stats overall this season are better, and the situation certainly is better for Cincinnati, as I just pointed out. And you have seen line movement against the public Giants down from -150 to -144. 82% of the tickets on them and 85% of the cash. So it looks like they have the cash discrepancy for now, but I've seen that kind of shifting around a bit, and they are certainly a public home favorite here. The public not liking Cincinnati recently. Cincinnati been really struggling recently. And San Francisco winning a couple of games. San Francisco was on a pretty bad stretch before then, and they won a couple of games against Colorado. I mean, come on. Colorado's one of the worst teams in baseball, so, I mean, who cares about beating Colorado, really? San Francisco, I mean, they're debatably not even the better team here. You're here and don't have the matchup edge here, and you're getting – the game is lined like San Francisco is getting more than home field here, and it's lined like San Francisco is the better team and it has the better of this matchup, and I just don't see that, which is why I think the line is kind of moving against them here. You can grab Cincinnati at a decent underdog price here, so that's what we'll do. So those plays today are Denver Nuggets trying to stay alive, +4.5, and in baseball we're going to have Chicago White Sox at some very small money line favorite. That's not even really a favorite price anymore. I don't know the exact number that I'm going to take yet, but we'll see. Milwaukee at a small favorite price as well with Robert Gasser. If it gets to be above -130, could potentially look to be a run line there. So Crochet and Gasser, the younger pitchers, so I think have a little bit of an edge there. And then the situational edge with Cincinnati, you're going to get them, Cincinnati Reds, at a decent money line underdog price. All right, that's going to do it, man. Peace.